Conservation leadership means understanding and applying the latest and best science to the ecosystems in which we live. An ecosystem is like a spider's web. When one of the physical or biological strands of the ecosystem is changed, other parts are also affected through complex linkages. To care for ecosystems, we use a management approach, blending social, economic, physical, and biological needs and values. The evolving science of ecosystems teaches us to look at a natural system as a whole, not just the sum of its parts. Ecosystems change at different scales of both space and time. As humans, we see our world at one particular scale, approximately 5 feet above the ground, for a lifespan of about 70 years. Most natural processes occur on scales that make it very difficult for us to perceive them. We use many forms of technology to gain perspective on these hidden and complex ecosystems, from the very large to the very small. Small-scale ecosystems are everywhere, even under your feet. The old-growth forests of the Pacific Northwest may be the most diverse land-based ecosystems on Earth. More than 200,000 individual insects and mites live in each square meter of soil.
It is interesting that people haven't looked at soil, that it is, quote-unquote, a frontier of science because it's right there under your feet. There's such an enormous diversity of creatures that live there. 200, 250 kinds of invertebrates just in a square meter. It's phenomenal.
Dr. Moldenke began to look at the role that these tiny creatures play in the larger forest ecosystem.
But then I started to ask myself, in this new science of soil ecology, what are the bugs actually doing? What are the functional roles that they're playing in the ecosystem of the forest?
The soil arthropods live in a medium of their own making.
What, in fact, the upper layers of soil are the fecal pellets of invertebrates. And matter of fact, when I talk to some Forest Service audiences, I write on the blackboard BPGT. And then at the end of the talk, I ask them what it means. And most of them have figured it out. It says, bug poop grows trees. That's what the topsoil is. 100% of it, if there's not a little living root in there or an actual live critter or an actual live germ, all of it is fecal material.
In the soil nutrient cycle, a millipede starts the process by eating fallen leaves. Mites and springtails feed on fecal pellets and fungi, while micropredators feed on them. As more mites graze the fungi off tree roots, nutrients are released back to the trees. This cycle is essential to the very existence of the forest.
In the face of all this diversity in the ecosystem, all these arthropods in the system, there are one or two that perform a keystone role in the system that nobody else does. And one of these is the cyanide-producing millipede. Nearly every single conifer needle or deciduous leaf that hits the forest floor has to pass through the gut of this one organism before it can enter into the nutrient recycling process. Even though it's just one species out there, the whole decomposition system seems to hinge upon the abundance and the health of the populations of that one species.
By monitoring soil diversity, researchers can help forest managers sustain forest health and productivity to meet people's needs. And because change usually occurs faster at the microscale, potential problems can be identified sooner.
We have found that surveys of the soil food web allow us to say certain things about total ecosystem health. And being able to say something about total ecosystem health of the soil at this stage allows you to evaluate different forest management practices without having to wait decades or centuries for those trees to grow.
To get to the next level of ecosystem scale, we're going to take a crane. It may look like an ordinary construction crane, but it's the only one of its kind in North America. The forest canopy is on the frontier of ecosystem science. Until recently, very little was known about this crucial boundary, where the forest meets the sky.
I'm really excited about the forest canopy because it is the place where very important processes concerning forest health and productivity have been going on for years without us being able to study them.
Until the Wind River Canopy crane was erected, scientists used ropes and platforms to explore the treetops.
Unlike the tropics where there's a fairly uniform canopy, what we've got here is these deep canyons that run almost all the way down to the ground, and then these spiked tall trees on top, almost like the mountains with the deep valleys in between. It's a perspective you just can't get very well from the ground.
Cranes had been used previously to explore the tropical forests in Panama and Venezuela, but this is the first to be used in North America, and it's opened a new frontier to understanding the temperate rainforest of the Pacific Northwest.
There's two areas of the forest which are incredibly difficult to study, the below-ground environment or the soil environment, and the forest canopy, the difficult to access areas of the high forest. It's essentially where much of the action is in a forest, and it's up in the tops of the tallest trees, where things are going on that control the productivity and health.
All the energy and much of the nitrogen that enters the forest ecosystem is captured by the canopy, making it critical to forest productivity. The 260-foot tower carries a gondola that can be guided to almost any location within the 550-foot diameter.
So this gives us access to over 5.5 acres of forest, so we not only can look at the individual structure of the trees, but look at how the trees relate to each other, how the structure of the whole stand fits together.
Among the benefits that scientists hope to achieve are better ways to control forest disease, improve air quality, and provide wildlife habitat.
Now we have an access tool which brings us up to this dynamic area of the forest canopy, and we'll finally be able to get a look in long term. The canopy crane gives us the ability to go back repeatedly to any point in this three-dimensional space and do dynamic studies of process rather than just a picture in time.
The landscape level of ecosystem scale is the most familiar to you and me. It's the scale that we see as we drive along the highway. People have been altering their landscapes for thousands of years. Here in southern Colorado, a community has come together out of the need to restore their lands to a healthier, more productive ecosystem. This landscape-scale ecosystem management project is occurring on the western edge of Colorado's San Juan National Forest.
Ponderosa pine forests used to burn very regularly. Prior to 1880, the average time between successive fires in the same stand was only between 5 and 35 years. But the fires all stopped abruptly about 1880 in the San Juans and in fact all through the west. And many of the areas today have not burned in over 100 years.
As settlers moved in, fire was pushed out, and people began to make their own claims on the forest.
Another change between the forest before 1870 and the forest today is in the size of the trees. This is a result not only of the lack of fire, but also the heavy logging that was done at the turn of the century. But today, the average size of trees in the west side pine zone is about 8 inches. And if you look at the average size of the stumps that were left by the turn of the century loggers, the stumps average about 27 inches in size. So we've lost most of the big trees that used to be in these forests.
These dense stands of small trees are susceptible to both disease and catastrophic wildfire. The shortage of large trees was weakening the local timber industry. Using research by Dr. Romme, the Forest Service developed a pilot timber sale called the Pines Project to help restore both the forest ecosystem and the local economy.
Hopefully, the Pines Project is going to demonstrate that we can take a certain amount of timber off of the forest and enhance the forest rather than damage the forest. And I totally believe that's possible. Well, we use 100% of the tree that we bring into the yard. And maybe we can all see that there is a benefit to using some of the trees off the forest, not all of them, but some of them, and leaving some to grow to be a larger size, but yet make a lot better use of everything that comes off the forest.
By harvesting some of the smaller trees and reintroducing fire to the ecosystem, scientists hope to restore the forest to a more diverse, healthier, sustainable condition, providing choices for present and future generations. But the result of this ecosystem management project will not be known for many years.
We need to go in there and really make some good, rigorous scientific measurements to see if we're accomplishing what we think we're going to accomplish. Because this kind of operation has not been done before. This is not in the textbook. We're kind of creating a new approach to forestry here.
An airplane provides us with the right speed and the right height to view the regional level of ecosystems. Here in the Columbia River Basin, a public and private partnership of landowners and resource experts are using sophisticated computer models to help determine the best ways to manage a large ecosystem over the long term.
This project is unique in that we've never really looked at interactions at this scale before. Most of our careers have been focused at the fine scale, at projects and within communities and counties, and we've very seldom backed off to look at the bigger picture.
The planning area encompasses much of 4 western states. At this scale, researchers can study the larger patterns and processes of ecosystem components, such as salmon runs, air quality, and wildfire, all of which transcend man-made boundaries.
Through this project, we've been able to take a look at how the various aspects of science come together, including the social and economic aspects of science, and then wrap those into management decisions.
Understanding ecosystems at this scale is possible because of recent developments in technology.
The technologies that have come online recently, such as computer technology, geographic information systems, databases, and so on, have enabled us to be able to look the information over in a much more comprehensive way than we ever would have been able to before now.
By sharing information with all the people of the Columbia Basin, decisions can be made collaboratively.
Ecosystems are about us. It's about people. And we interact with ecosystems, and ecosystems in some extent are dependent on us because we have increased our ability to alter them to such a high degree. So it behooves us to bring forward our understanding, to recognize that they not only provide our life support, but in some extents they are dependent on us making good choices. So ecosystems and humans are interwoven.
When people ventured into space, we got our first look at the global ecosystem. We also began to see how a smaller ecosystem on one part of the globe connects with another ecosystem half a world away. We begin here in an agricultural valley of Northern California, a nesting area of the Swainson's hawk. The alfalfa fields of the Butte Valley farmers provide a hunting ground for the hawk. The hawks in turn benefit the farmers by reducing the populations of crop-destroying rodents. Wildlife biologist Brian Woodbridge has worked with the farmers for more than 10 years, improving hawk habitat.
A basic perception that a lot of people have is that if an ecosystem is not in its natural state, then it's somehow unhealthy. And what our results here are showing is that it's possible to have an ecosystem that has been very largely modified by human activities and is producing commodities and supporting human activity that also has many, if not most, of the components of a healthy functioning system.
But understanding the local ecosystem is only part of the story.
In certain years, quite a few of our adult breeding Swainson's hawks don't return from migration.
The Swainson's hawk is a neotropical migrant, a species that escapes winter by flying from the northern to the southern hemisphere. It is an annual journey of over 14,000 miles.
Until recently, just the thought of monitoring a 14,000-mile round-trip migration was sort of a mind-boggling thing to think about. In recent years, satellite technology has advanced to the point where transmitters became small enough to be placed on a bird the size of a Swainson's hawk.
The 1-ounce transmitter does not harm the bird nor affect its ability to fly.
Prior to last year's study, it really wasn't known whether Swainson's hawks were scattered over all of southern South America or whether they were localized in certain places.
In order to monitor hawk migrations firsthand, Woodbridge and his volunteers decided to track the birds themselves. After
several days of driving around in the vicinity where our satellite radio bird was, according to the data, we finally came across our first large flock of Swainson's hawks, and it was about 2,000 birds. We knew right away it was more hawks than had ever been seen in one place on the wintering grounds, and it was just, we were ecstatic. We've been working with hawks, all of us, for close to 10 years, and used to only seeing one or two at a time, so to see 2,000 is pretty indescribable.
But their excitement was soon tempered with sadness when they discovered why many birds had not been returning.
We found a pile of over 200 birds that had been burned by the owners of the estate because they fell near the house. And we found a few hundred more here. We don't even know where to begin the estimate for out in the field.
The researchers concluded that between 15 to 20,000 Swainson's hawks had been killed by pesticides.
Our discovery has tremendous conservation significance. The Swainson's hawks that we found were inhabiting an agricultural system of alfalfa and grains and crops similar to that in the Butte Valley, but also that these flocks are concentrated to an extent that makes them very vulnerable to small-scale changes in land use practices.
Woodbridge is now working with the Argentine farmers on an ecosystem approach to pest control. He's optimistic, but recognizes the complexity of these human and biological interactions at the global scale.
There's no simple answer because today's answers will probably change along with the landscape.
As conservation leaders, our goal is healthy, productive, diverse, and sustainable ecosystems. Ecosystems that provide a full range of benefits for present and future generations. From the micro scale of the underground world of insects and mites, to the global scale of world travelers like the Swainson's hawk, we are working to both understand and care for ecosystems, so that we and our companions on this earth can continue our long journey together.